Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The whiplash of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran continues as it approaches its fourth week. We began the day with signs of imminent boots on the ground in Iran and ended with a Trump post on social media saying he will consider winding down the war. Go figure, I guess. Today, MS Now learned that this administration is sending an additional 2,500 Marines and 3 warships to the Middle East. That's in addition to the 2,500 troops Trump ordered to the region last week. Now, it takes a few weeks for them to get there, but we are now up to 5,000 American service members en route to the theater of combat that we know of. And I have to say, it is a little hard to imagine they're just going to go there and sit on the boats. I mean, take a step back. Remember where we were a month ago, right? They were moving all of these naval assets into the region from all over the world. It was a sort of unprecedented armada that had built up. And there was, at the time, an argument that this was all basically a Trumpian bluff, that it was being deployed as leverage for the ongoing nuclear negotiations, which were taking place with Iran, with the president's son-in-law and a real estate guy he's friends with. And as it turns out, I think clearly it wasn't just a negotiating tactic. They were preparing to start a war of choice, which they did. Now, to be absolutely clear, we have no idea what's happening now and if they are sending in ground troops to actually engage in combat. But I guess that's the point. Everything from the beginning of the war has been chaotic. There appears to be no strategy. And the commander-in-chief is constantly contradicting himself when he can bring himself to actually pay attention to the war he started, which isn't always. Maybe that's what he was doing when he took to social media just hours ago to his version of mission almost accomplished. He said, we're very close to meeting our military objectives, which, of course, he made up after the fact and are constantly shifting. He said he wants to wind down the war. What's that mean? We don't know. It's very hard to square that with all the other signs that the conflict isn't just dragging on, but it is intensifying and escalating. Instead of some quick decapitation of the regime, like we arguably saw in Venezuela, where we kidnapped and abducted the leader of that country, was replaced with his vice president, who we now, I guess, have good terms with, Trump likes because they're giving us oil. Unlike that, in Iran, as Bloomberg News puts it, we are approaching a quagmire. The White House now wants $200 billion in additional money to fund the war. That does not seem like something they would be asking for if they were looking to wind down anytime soon. And just today, the president says he has no interest in a ceasefire.
Well, look, we can have dialogue, but I don't want to do a ceasefire. You know, you don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side. They don't have a Navy. They don't have an Air Force. They don't have any equipment. They don't have any spotters. They don't have anti-aircraft. They don't have radar. And their leaders have all been killed at every level. We're not looking to do that.
All right, so we're not looking to do that. We're also close to achieving our military objectives. In fact, we already won, he keeps saying, and we also may send in ground troops. Which is it? Again, no one knows. What we do know is that the Strait of Hormuz is still closed to non-Iranian ships. 5 military and shipping experts telling MS Now that reopening the strait would almost certainly require U.S. ground troops. And again, just looking at all this from afar, it really looks like that's the plan, right? They're going to send 5,000 troops in order for them to engage in combat to reopen the strait, which would mean literally risking American lives to keep the price of oil low. But Trump also says the strait is basically not our problem.
We don't use the strait. The United States, we don't need it. Europe needs it. Korea, Japan, China, a lot of other people. So they'll have to get involved a little bit on that one.
Now, he's wrong, of course. In fact, he's so wrong that I don't know if he's, an idiot or pretending to be. But if you know anything about global energy markets, right, 20% of the world's energy supply goes through the strait. Oil is a global commodity, globally priced. Just because that oil doesn't ship to the U.S., and he's right about that, doesn't mean U.S. consumers are going to be fully insulated from the resulting price shock. As you no doubt know. I mean, have you filled up your car in the last week? And so this control over 20% of the world's oil shipping is obviously a major leverage point for Iran. It's the big one. It's the reason that everyone talks about the Strait of Hormuz when they talk about Iran. So one solution the administration appears to be floating is to seize Iran's Karj Island, which is key for their oil exports. But even then, Trump will not publicly commit to a plan either way.
Well, I may have a plan or I may not, but how would I ever say that to a reporter? If I said that to a reporter, Marco would say, please, sir, let's bring you over to the helicopter immediately, right? No, I can't tell you that.
So, right, the conceit here is that the chaos and the contradiction and the constant oscillations is all some engineered deception, right? I may have a plan, I may not, I can't tell you. But again, here's what we know, that seizing that island, which is something that military planners inside the Pentagon have wargamed for literally decades, it is crucial to Iran. Everyone understands that during a war, Iran would use Hormuz and the Strait as leverage. So this is something people thought about. And seizing the island would likely require boots on the ground, right? Combat troops invading Iran and fighting there. Even in that case, though, there's also no indication it would force Iran's hand to reopen the Strait. This is key. There's a very good chance it would likely embolden Iran to escalate its attacks that it's already undertaking on energy infrastructure in the surrounding Gulf states, which, to put it mildly, would be probably pretty catastrophic. I mean, we are headed towards, if it continues in this way, and a genuinely unprecedented energy crisis, at least as bad as those of the late 1970s. But even as things stand, we are on the precipice of a potentially devastating situation. I mean, gas prices are up significantly. They are still rising. Officials in Saudi Arabia are now warning that a barrel of oil could top $180, that would be a record-breaking price, if the conflict does not wind down before April. Analysts who spoke to the Wall Street Journal said $200 barrels were not out of the question. In fact, United Airlines just put out a memo a few minutes ago saying they're preparing for $170, that they're not going to drop below that until the end of next year. This is the leverage Iran has. It's the leverage that anyone who's thought about this particular conflict for more than 10 minutes knows they have. And they intend to keep using it. In fact, this is really an amazing turn of events. The White House just lifted sanctions on some Iranian oil, the people that were bombing. That feels like a pretty good indication that Donald Trump is starting to get desperate. The war started out unpopular. High gas prices are going to make it so much worse. Today, the president got on the phone with our own Stephanie Ruhle at MS Now and just flat out lied about the origins of this war. Quote, I hit Iran with a B-2 bomber because 2 weeks later they had the nuclear weapon. They would have used it within a day or two or a week. Now, that's simply untrue. It's not just untrue at sort of a normal level. It's preposterous and insane. Okay? Iran was nowhere near achieving a nuclear weapon. This has been widely reported, including, crucially, from multiple members of the Trump administration, including under oath testimony from his own intelligence officials before Congress this week. You'll remember that Trump and his administration crowed about how they had completely obliterated the nuclear program just last summer. We were all there. We all lived through it. We all heard it. But I think the reason he's lying, they're about to get a nuke and just drop it in a few days, is that he knows his war of aggression is unpopular and getting less popular by the day. So he is throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks. Today, he said, we're winding down the war. Today, he also said we've already won the war. He said our allies will help us open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we will help our allies open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we don't need to open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we never needed help from our allies. He said our allies are cowards. He said NATO is a paper tiger. Meanwhile, again, the very real war that is actually happening far away, the human costs keep piling up. 13 Americans have lost their lives, 17 Israelis, 1,400 Iranians, millions more displaced. Over 1,000 have been killed just in Lebanon due to the Israeli incursion there. More than 150 others killed in the surrounding Gulf states. And, as is clear, the commander-in-chief, and again, we saw this in 2020. Remember, we've all blocked it out of our memory. It was a rough year. No one wants to think about it, but we all did live through 2020, and we saw how he handled COVID. There's no plan here. Remember? Open the schools, close the schools. Everyone has to socially distance. It'll be open by Easter. So, are we putting boots on the ground in Iran? Are we seizing Karj Island? Are we reopening the Strait of Hormuz? Are we winding down the war? Who knows? I don't think Donald Trump even knows.